Hello, I'm Rudranath Sanyal. Welcome to War and Peace, your go-to program on security matters and geopolitics. Once again, we thank all our viewers who keep in touch with us from different parts of the country and abroad. Well, viewers, in this very special edition for you, our lead topic is Gandhi's thoughts and the security environment. We will also bring you a segment on the value of indigenous defense hardware production and the Make in India drive. Our guests for you today are Lieutenant General Satish Nambiar, former senior commander of the UN Peacekeeping Force, who has joined us from Noida, and Lieutenant General Subrata Saha, former Deputy Chief of Army, who is now a member of the National Security Advisory Board. So, our lead topic for you in this edition of War and Peace, the thoughts of Mahatma Gandhi and the security environment. At a time when Pakistan is on the verge of getting blacklisted by the global body of Financial Action Task Force, there is a view that Pakistan's fault lines and terrorism started to crystallize as soon as Muhammad Ali Jinnah moved away from Gandhian values to opt for partition and Pakistan. A book titled Gandhi's Hinduism and the Struggle Against Jinnah's Islam by renowned author and member of parliament M.J. Akbar has attracted the attention of policy planners and experts from India and abroad, cutting across political divides. The book has brought out new facets of Jinnah's 7-year politics of fear that curiously coincided with the period when England was beset by the Second World War and its aftermath. The book underscores Mahatma Gandhi's holistic vision that equally touched the vital nodes of geopolitics for a sustainable security environment. Former President Mr. Pranab Mukherjee, who launched Gandhi's Hinduism, the Struggle Against Jinnah's Islam, quoted from the book and explained how Mahatma Gandhi's life was especially about Hindu-Muslim unity.
I quote from the book, Gandhi wanted India's unity at any price. Jinnah wanted partition at any cost. Unquote. I would like to go, it would go to the credit of Mahatma Gandhi that he not only saw the nefarious designs of the British in the first creating and then fostering the communal divide in India only to perpetuate their rule. When they saw that the continuation of the British rule was not viable, and more, they did everything under the sun to divide the subcontinent for their future geopolitical and strategic interests, with the Muslim League under Mr. Jinnah as an active cohort.
But if one goes little deeper into what Akbarji has said, there's a layer above that also. And it is not the end of it. That invincible spirit, that immortal spirit of this thing ultimately will prevail. And that was the very strong conviction of Gandhi. Probably in history, 70 years is not a very long period. Time will pass and we'll learn by our own experience. Probably we will do the right things after we have done, experimented with everything else. We will realize that our coexistence is a possibility and a reality and is the only thing that is beneficial. And at the end of it, after the reader goes through the book, will say that it is the Gandhi's spirit and the Gandhi's this thing which ultimately will prevail. I must again congratulate him.
Everybody knows about partition, right? But why it happened and how it happened, too many facts lie buried in the archives. And it's astonishing why these facts have not yet been put into the public narrative? What were the historic blunders that were committed? What was the intent? I mean, extraordinary. Gandhiji never accepted partition. Even when he was forced to acknowledge that it would happen, he said no. He did not believe in the artificial division between Hindus and Muslims. He thought Hindus and Muslims belonged to the same nation. There was tremendous cultural synthesis between the two. And he believed that Hindu-Muslim unity was the foundation of our country's strength and of our country's future. And that is why he thought that Jinnah, who was a political Muslim at best, not even a believer, I mean, nobody mentions Jinnah, probably didn't even know the prayers. He never fasted. Even on the, he did not even know that on the day Pakistan was getting independence, which is 14th August, that was in the middle of Ramzan. And he sent out invitations for lunch, right? But there are many more serious things. Now, this book has actually only worked or been relied upon original sources. The 12 massive volumes of the Transfer of Power papers, the 100 volumes of Gandhi, 12 volumes of Jinnah's papers, which I have.
So my only question, last question is, how relevant do you think at this point of time, such a book coming up, how relevant it is and how important it is and crucial at the same time?
If you do not know the truth about the past, how shall we create the future?
There have been many books on the history of India's partition, but this book by Mr. M.J. Akbar is very timely, very relevant, but most importantly very different from many of the books that have come out in the past. It highlights many unknown facets of generally about that period, but also about Gandhiji's role, which is very important for every Indian to understand, especially in today's situation, where we again see a lot of misgivings, misunderstandings between communities, between groups of people on the rise.
Let's begin with General Satish Nambiar, who has joined us from Noida. General Nambiar, what do you make of Gandhi's ideas and thoughts and its impact on geopolitics and the security environment?
Well, I would like to, start by, saying in context of Mahatma Gandhi, the national security environment and the military, by saying that I was 11 and a half years old when he was assassinated in January 1948. Now, for us of that generation, youngsters, young boys in school, Mahatma Gandhi was an icon. There's no question. He was the embodiment and personification of the freedom struggle. Now, I don't claim to be an authority on him or on his writings or on his teachings. But of one thing I have no doubt, as someone who grew up in the aftermath of his assassination and saw much of what went on within our country and in various parts of the world, I have no doubt in my mind that he was quite a unique individual who had some outstanding qualities of head and heart, notwithstanding some human frailties, of course. That actually made him a leader without peer at that time. And what struck people like us of our generation was that his choice of ahimsa as the weapon against the British establishment was quite something. I mean, one can't really reflect on that in any great detail, except to suggest that it impressed people of our generation. Only a person of his capacity, I think, in terms of moral values and character qualities, could have carried it through. And that, I think, is something which one must acknowledge. And as someone who has been around the world, the only other person that I can think of who comes anywhere near him is Nelson Mandela. I can't think of any other world leader who comes close to him.
And General Nambiar, how does it have a bearing on hardcore military matters?
On reflection, looking back, I find that many of the pillars on which he based the movement for the freedom struggle are akin to long-standing principles of war, to which we were, exposed in the military. I mean, in 4 decades and later, I have been through that. For instance, I think of 3 or 4 of them. Selection and maintenance of the aim, for instance. I mean, he had selected what his objective was, and he pursued it with dogged determination. That, I think, was quite outstanding. Single-minded commitment, as it were. That is, in fact, is one of the basic principles of war, the selection and maintenance of the aim. The second was economy of effort, where I think he used satyagraha as a weapon. Quite unique. I don't think it had been used before, nor has it been used since. The third, I think, was something which is very, very important even today, maintenance of morale, which I think he did by identifying himself with the common man and being with them throughout their sorrow and suffering. And of course, surprise, which is a basic element of one of the basic principles of war. I mean, the only example one can quote in that context is how he surprised the British with the salt satyagraha, the Dandi March, as it were, caught them completely off guard. So this is something, I think, when one looks back, you find that Mahatma Gandhi probably had some of these and it's not surprising in my view that he had some idea of what he was doing in military terms or security terms, because from what I know, I would say distinct from many of the political leadership of that time, he had an idea of what national security was about. Because I think, to the best of my knowledge, he had participated in the Boer War in South Africa, probably only as a medical assistant, but he was there in that war. Then I think, as many of us are aware, his advice to the senior military leadership of that time, people like General Thimaia and others, who wished to leave the service of the British Indian Army and join the freedom struggle. And he advised them to stay on. With sound advice, he said that when we attain freedom, we will need senior military leadership that has the capacity to handle matters military in free India. And finally, I think his endorsement of the Jammu and Kashmir operations in October 1947. So all this, I think, gives one an idea that he had a full awareness of matters that affected national security, international security, in context of international relations.
What more would you like to add?
Well, you see, the qualities of leadership that he displayed are very akin to the qualities of military leadership that we have been taught over the years and which we need to imbibe. And I'll just enumerate 1 or 2 of them to highlight the point. I think one of the main qualities of a military leader, a good leader, is his capacity to himself overcome the fear that one experiences in battle, and equally importantly to assist his subordinates, his leaders, his troops, to overcome the fear that they encounter on the battlefield in the face of the enemy and bullets flying all over and shells. I think that is something which, by his personal example, he set. And that leads me on to the second major quality of leadership, the capacity to lead by personal example, which I think he was super at. And he always led from the front, as it were. The Indian military leadership, the junior leadership of today, similarly does that. In all the wars that we fought, it's been seen, leading from the front by personal example.
General Nambiar, at the book release function, the former President and former Defense Minister, Pranab Mukherjee, said Gandhi's life was a hymn to communal harmony. So now we find those quotients in the realm of the armed forces as well.
Well, that is at the root of the Indian Army's culture and ethos. There's no religion as far as we are concerned in the units and battalions. We're all one, and Indians and everyone. I mean, we have so many instances of in our units where if the Panditji is away on chutti, the Maulvi takes over and runs the prayers in the mandir. Same with the Granthi and things like that. So there is, that is one the great feature of our military ethos, the Indian armies, that religion has no our men are very religious, highly religious people, but it has no role to play in terms of determining who you are and who you mix around with and what your actions are. It's a great tradition that I am proud to say we have maintained over the years and continue to maintain. Muhammad Ali Jinnah has his own agenda, whereas in case of Mahatma Gandhi, it was as much humanism as it was related to nationalism. Getting freedom from the British had nothing to do with Hindu-Muslim divide and all that. Whereas in Jinnah's case, it was a clear, he had a clear agenda as to what he wanted.
The security environment is beset by some measure of this politics of fear that you spoke of. So, to come to General Subrata Saha now, General Saha, what according to you is the value of Gandhi's ideas in terms of geopolitics and the very current security environment?
Well, Gandhi, to my mind, whether it is for war or whether it is for the freedom movement, amongst other things, he did stand out for very high levels of preparedness, right? And when we talk about Gandhi's thoughts on war, well, we need not confine ourselves to war to do with violence. In his life, Gandhi did fight a war against poverty. He fought a war against, well, shall we say, caste and community divisions. He stood for unity. And even if you see it strictly from the point of view of wars as we understand between warring factions, states and so on, wherever it benefited the community, wherever he thought that it would do well for the welfare of the community, he did support.
This politics of fear, the security environment is beset by that sort of a situation now, especially in West Asia. Proxy war and terrorism flows from such a politics. So, Gandhi was perhaps trying to nip it in the bud?
Yes, most certainly so, because war, whether we talk, as you are alluding to, in West Asia today or in the past, there is a degree of politics of fear that you're working on, right? So, in that sense, if you look at Gandhi and his approach to non-violence, it was probably with that, in a sense, utopian ideal to see if aims could be achieved without violence. But that did not for a moment suggest not opposing. It did not for a moment suggest anything else but yet another political technique. I mean, even if you were to go back to Clausewitz, what did he say? War is politics by another means. In that sense,
on military science.
In that sense, even Satyagraha is a tool. It is a political technique by another means.
You're watching War and Peace, your go-to program on security matters and geopolitics. We will take a break now, after which we will bring you a segment on the value of indigenous defense production and what went into the recent DefExpo. Welcome back. You're watching War and Peace, your go-to program on security matters and geopolitics. And in this edition of War and Peace, our guests for you are Lieutenant General Subrata Saha, former Deputy Chief of Army, who is now member of the National Security Advisory Board, and Lieutenant General Satish Nambiar, former Senior Commander of the UN Peacekeeping Force, who has joined us from Noida. So now, viewers, let's bring you a vignette on the scope of indigenous defense hardware manufacture. So, to come to General Subrata Saha straight away, this in a sense is your super specialization, General Saha. When you were the Deputy Chief of Army, you encouraged Make in India projects, you got involved with universities. So, what has that experience been like?
You see, that was literally like a mission, you know, to reach out to the industry and academia across the country in different industrial and academic hubs. In fact, we had 32 interactions, and with a team of 6 brigadiers, we were going myself to all these places, telling the people, telling the industry, telling the academia what our needs are for the next 10 to 15 years. And to take it forward, we set up the Army Design Bureau on 31st August 2016 with the sanctions from then Raksha Mantri Shri Manohar Parrikar. And also we released those compendium of problem statements, volume 1, 2, 3. And now when you go to the DEF Expo 2020 in Lucknow, when you see those problem statements turned into solutions, into products and on display, it's a tremendous satisfaction. And as we are seeing now, you know, over the last 5 years, the kind of momentum which defense manufacturing is picking up in India is absolutely phenomenal. And of course, there are miles to go, but that said, I think we made some very good progress.
And another interesting feature is that there is now Make 1 and Make 2. So, can you qualify?
You see, Make 2 was introduced in the Defense Procurement Procedure 2016. And that was primarily because a realization was there that manufacturing in India had improved. So therefore, there is a potential to tap the capability on a much wider scale. So effectively, Make 1 is meant obviously for, you know, larger systems which involve higher expenditure, which involve much more infrastructure, and which require obviously much higher order of skills. So Make 1 is 90% government funded, 10% industry funded. Whereas Make 2 is entirely industry funded. It is meant primarily for subsystems, components and so on, which go to make a system, so to speak. It's, in both the cases, once the developed product meets the trials, orders are assured. So therefore, I think it is a good way by which we can make development of component systems within the country and promote indigenization. Like I said, it was introduced in April 2016 when DPP 2016 was promulgated, and early in 2018 this entire process was further simplified, and by simplification what they did is they cut down the timelines, and I'm talking here about Make 2, because Make 2 did not require as elaborate a process as Make 1 needed. So now we are seeing the effect of that. I think by the end of 2019, we had 44 proposals of Make 2, which had been given the approval in principle. So quite evidently, Make 2 is making a good progress now.
Right. Now, there's this talk about involving the private sector in a big way. So, what do you think should be that fine line to safeguard classified information?
This reminds me of a question which I had got from one of the very senior industrialists in Ahmedabad when we were carrying out an interaction with the industry and the academy over there. So when this question was put to me that by putting out all your requirements of the next 10 to 15 years, aren't you sharing your secrets? So my response to that was, sir, isn't it better that I share my requirements with you today rather than importing them 10 or 15 years down the line? So what is the secrecy and where is the priority of the secrecy? I would much rather trust my own countrymen to live up to our security requirements rather than depending on import.
General Satish Nambiar in Noida, how would you like to look at the future after taking in all the factors and quotients that we discussed today?
I think the future is bright. Things are changing. I think we are beginning to realize that we need to look after our own interests. No one else is going to do. If we think that all the Americans and the British and the Russians and the French are all doing business with us because they like our faces, we've got it all wrong. They are doing it for purely commercial reasons. So we have to get out of that bind, develop our own capacities, depend on ourselves, and prove to the world that we are capable of producing the best in the world, which I have no doubt we are. And I can only wish our these scientists, the industry, and our military men all the very best in their efforts.
So, on that potential note, we come to the end of this edition of War and Peace, your go-to program on security matters and geopolitics. If you wish to write to us, you can send your letters to War and Peace, Room 513, Tower B, Doordarshan Bhavan, Copernicus Marg, New Delhi 110001. You can also send your emails to warandpeace2004@hotmail.com. And let us remind you, viewers, that when you write to us, you must mention your phone numbers and address. So, thank you, General Satish Nambiar in Noida.
My pleasure as always. Thank you very much.
Thank you, General Subrata Saha. It was a pleasure having you on the show. And thank you all. Bye-bye.